Hey everyone, how's it going? So, since the beginning of 2025, I've been doing a little bit of an experiment. I decided to start sending out a bi-weekly email, so 2 times a month. And in this email, I talk about things that I wrestle with as a founder, a business owner, a creative, a filmmaker, as a human being. There is really no rhyme or reason other than what are the things that I think would be helpful for other people who are in marketing, advertising, filmmaking, or just entrepreneurial endeavors. What are things that I think would be helpful to those people? What are things that we all are wrestling with and dealing with? And candidly, what are the things that are fundamental to who we are as human beings that we all might find commonality around and maybe benefit each other by having deeper conversations around? That's the Human Flourishing newsletter. Fast forward a few months, I've gotten great feedback from people. It's been a really cool way to connect with both old members of my community and new members of the community. There are a couple thousand people who are part of this newsletter that goes out every couple weeks. But someone suggested a week or two ago something that I thought was a great idea. And that was that a lot of people do not like reading long, lengthy emails. Some people do. And if that's you, awesome. I'm going to keep doing the newsletter. If that's not you, if you do not like reading big blocks of text, but would rather listen or watch someone make a fool of themselves on video, boy, I have great news for you. We are going to be turning the newsletter into a podcast, a video podcast like this one that you see right here. Very simple production values. Basically me sitting here with my laptop in our studio with no other crew, essentially reading the newsletter to whoever is interested in getting the audio or video form of said newsletter. So with that in mind, let's jump into the first newsletter in this podcast form, which was the one that went out earlier today, middle of June in 2025, talking about conversations that I've had with a really good friend. This is the Human Flourishing newsletter, and now podcast. So lately I've been spending a lot of time with someone who, over the past several months, has transformed from a wonderful client into a wonderful friend. For the purposes of this newsletter, let's just call him Dan. That's because his name actually is Dan. Dan co-founded a media company that has over 10 million subscribers across all platforms. He's an amazing person, and he's also an agnostic, which is interesting if you know anything about my background, which is that I'm not an agnostic. I'm a pretty devout Christian. In Dan's own words, he's, quote, compelled by the neuroscientific case for Buddhism, but still sympathetic to many aspects of Christianity. Yeah, Dan talks way more eloquently than I do. He also says that all the great religions point to the same mountain of truth, just from different angles. And you know what? Even though Dan and I violently disagree on some things, actually, that's not true at all. We probably try way too hard to not offend each other. But he and I do largely agree on this point. So he would say that principles are emergent, and I would say that they stem from a designer who built his intentionality and love into every facet of creation. But either way, we've spent a lot of time talking about these principles because of a film that we're working on. The film is about an important public intellectual and his principles of human progress, ideas like mutual benefit, equal rights, openness, and many others. Anyhow, the more Dan and I've talked, the more I've started seeing these timeless principles everywhere. You know that thing where once you're focused on something, you start noticing it all around you? The Germans have a word for it that sounds a little bit like a sneeze, Bader Meinhof. Case in point, I picked up Mere Christianity again recently for a small group I'm in. And right there in chapter 1, C.S. Lewis lays it out. And by it, I mean universal moral law. In other books, he calls it the Tao. But in this book, he calls it the universal moral law. And in Mere Christianity, he argues that deep down, all human beings know what's right. We all agree on the basics like fairness, kindness, humility, and others. But that even though we all agree and know deep down what's right, none of us actually consistently lives like we believe it. Here's Lewis in his own words. Quote, everyone has heard people quarreling. Sometimes it sounds funny, and sometimes it sounds merely unpleasant. But however it sounds, I believe we can learn something very important from listening to the kinds of things that these people say. They say things like this: "How'd you like it if anyone did the same to you?" Or, "That's my seat, I was there first." "Leave him alone, he isn't doing you any harm." "Why should you shove in first?" Give me a bit of your orange, I gave you a bit of mine." "Come on, you promised." People say things like that every day, educated people as well as uneducated, and children as well as grown-ups. What interests me about these remarks is that the man who makes them is not merely saying that the other man's behavior does not happen to please him. He's appealing to some kind of standard of behavior which he expects the other man to know about. And the other man very seldom replies, "To hell with your standard." Nearly always, he tries to make out that what he has been doing does not really go against the standard, or that if it does, there's some special excuse. He pretends that there's a special reason in this particular case why the person who took the seat had a right to do so. So Lewis goes on like this for several pages, but at the end of the chapter, he summarizes. These, then, are the 2 points I wanted to make. First, that human beings all over the earth have this curious idea that they ought to behave in a certain way and cannot really get rid of it. And secondly, that they do not in fact behave in that way. They know the law of nature, they break it. So what do you do with that tension between what we know and how we live? Enter my latest spiritual tool, the Oura Ring. It's this ring right here. O-U-R-A, Oura Ring. So Yetta bought it for me after finding out that I'd been wanting one for several months now. And now I'm using it to track everything. Heart rate, sleep quality, readiness score, whatever that is. But more importantly, the Oura Ring is helping me pay attention, to slow down, to breathe, to lower my stress, and to be here in the now. Mindfulness, Dan might call it. But for me, it reminds me of this. Quote, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." And in case that wasn't clear, that was Jesus in Matthew 6:34. So I'm learning slowly that presence isn't about Zen stillness or escaping the world, although maybe there can be some of that too. But for me, it's about keeping a clear mind about who I am, how I relate to others, including my Creator, and living a bit less in the future or the past. I'm trying to practice a little less distraction, which is tough, and trying instead to focus on how I'm treating those around me now, how I react to the stress stimuli now, whether I'm enjoying the moment with my family now, listening to a friend now, praying, you guessed it, now. You get the picture. Even Aristotle, who I'm told did not wear a smart ring, although history buffs, feel free to check me on this. Aristotle said something like this, quote, "Happiness is the activity of the soul in accordance with virtue, in a complete life." Happiness is the activity of the soul in accordance with virtue in a complete life. Meaning, happiness is the practice of a soul being virtuous, practicing virtue over the course of an entire life. Now, Aristotle didn't mean or think that all men automatically know how to be virtuous, but he did say that we learn to be virtuous through practice and repetition, or you might say habituation. And he continued in his Nicomachean Ethics, Book 2, quote, "We become just by doing just acts, temperate by doing temperate acts, brave by doing brave acts," end quote. Okay, so what's my point? My point is that I think through squinting eyes, Aristotle, Lewis, Dan, and I all agree a little bit more than we might sometimes think. Perhaps, like Lewis says, all people secretly know the laws of human nature. And perhaps, like Aristotle says, it's only through practicing those virtues that we habituate them into our daily practice to truly discover joy and peace and happiness. And perhaps today, as I'm looking at the mountain of deadlines that our team is facing, instead of habituating stress or the trappings of mental fatigue, perhaps I can practice stopping, breathing, saying a prayer of gratitude, and responding with love joy, peace, etc. instead. And perhaps not only I can, perhaps all of us can. Anyhow, until next time, here's to human flourishing.